My ex-husband getting me fired was the best career move I ever made. The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Subject line, immediate meeting HR conference room B. I stared at my laptop screen in the open concept office of Meridian Digital, coffee growing cold in my favorite mug, the one that said world's okayest marketer that my team had given me last Christmas. Around me, the usual morning buzz continued, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, Jake from sales already being too loud about his weekend golf game. But something felt wrong. In 3 years at Meridian, I'd never gotten a meeting request from HR that didn't come with context. No quick chat about benefits or annual review follow-up. Just immediate meeting. I grabbed my phone and texted my assistant Priya, "Do you know anything about an HR meeting?" Her response came back instantly, "No, and I checked your calendar last night." Nothing was scheduled. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Rebecca Martinez, our stone-faced HR director, and David Kim, my supposedly supportive VP. The conference room smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams, though maybe that last part was just my growing anxiety. "Sarah, we need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention," Rebecca began, sliding a manila folder across the mahogany table. "Regarding your recent performance and workplace conduct." I opened the folder with hands that had started to shake. Inside were printed emails, performance metrics, and what looked like complaint forms. My eyes scanned frantically, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "I'm sorry, what is this exactly?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. David cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Sarah, we've received multiple reports about missed deadlines, unprofessional behavior toward colleagues, and concerns about your ability to handle the Morrison account." The Morrison account. My baby. The $2.3 million client I'd landed 6 months ago through 18-hour days and a presentation I'd practiced until I could recite it in my sleep. The account that had single-handedly pushed our Q3 numbers into the stratosphere. Multiple reports from whom? I asked, flipping through pages that documented failures I'd never had, meetings I'd supposedly missed, emails I'd allegedly sent that dripped with hostility toward coworkers I considered friends. Rebecca and David exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a discussion. This was an execution. "The source isn't relevant," Rebecca said. "What matters is the pattern of behavior we're seeing." Pattern. As if 3 years of stellar reviews, 2 promotions, and a client retention rate of 94% meant nothing. As if my work hadn't literally kept the lights on during the pandemic slowdown. "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package," David continued, unable to meet my eyes. 8 weeks paid, plus your accumulated vacation time. "We think it's best if we part ways amicably." Amicably. The word tasted bitter. There was nothing amicable about this ambush, nothing fair about being destroyed by lies I couldn't even defend against because they wouldn't tell me who was telling them. But as I sat there, watching my career crumble like a sandcastle at high tide, one name echoed in my head with crystal clarity, Mark. My ex-husband, who'd promised during our divorce proceedings that I'd regret leaving him. Mark, who had mysteriously landed a consulting contract with Meridian just 2 months ago. Mark, who apparently played the long game better than I'd ever given him credit for. I signed the papers with steady hands, but inside, something fundamental was shifting. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The elevator ride down from the 15th floor felt like descending into hell, except hell probably had better lighting. I clutched my hastily packed box of personal items, 3 years of my life reduced to a succulent named Gerald, some charging cables, and that stupid mug that now felt like a cruel joke. In the lobby, I fumbled for my phone and called my best friend Lisa. She picked up on the second ring. "Sarah? Shouldn't you be in your Tuesday morning strategy meeting?" I just got fired. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that sitting in that conference room hadn't. "What? That's impossible. You're like, employee of the century over there." I explained everything while sitting in my car in the parking garage, watching Meridian employees walk past in their business casual armor. Normal people heading to normal jobs they still had. "This has Mark written all over it," Lisa said when I finished. "You know that, right?" "I know. But knowing it and proving it are two different things." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. "Lisa, what am I going to do? I've got my mortgage, the car payment, Mom's assisted living costs." "How much severance did they give you?" 8 weeks, plus 3 weeks of vacation time I'd saved up. So about 11 weeks total. "Okay. That's not nothing. That's breathing room." Breathing room. Right. 11 weeks to find another job in a field where everyone knew everyone, where Mark clearly had more influence than I'd realized. 11 weeks before financial disaster. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since college. I drank wine at 2 p.m. while wearing pajamas. I also did something much more productive. I made a list. First, I needed to understand exactly what had happened. Who had Mark talked to? What lies had he spread? How deep did his connections at Meridian run? Second, I needed to figure out my next move. The smart play was to start job hunting immediately, maybe reach out to some headhunters, update my LinkedIn profile with a diplomatic explanation about pursuing new opportunities. But as I sat there, surrounded by the apartment I'd worked 70-hour weeks to afford, something darker took root. Mark had played this game assuming I'd roll over. He'd counted on me being devastated, broken, maybe even crawling back to him. He'd forgotten something crucial about the woman he'd been married to for 6 years. I didn't roll over for anyone. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey Sarah, it's Jake Morrison from Morrison Industries. Heard some weird rumors about you leaving Meridian. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? I have some concerns about our account transition." Jake Morrison. Son of the company's founder, and technically my former client as of 4 hours ago. My pulse quickened. I typed back, "Coffee sounds perfect. How about grind at 10 a.m.? See you then. And Sarah? Bring your portfolio. I might have a proposition for you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Phoenix Rising. Because if Mark thought destroying my job would destroy me, he was about to learn the difference between Sarah the employee and Sarah Unleashed. The first lesson would be expensive. For him. The coffee shop buzzed with a morning rush, but Jake Morrison had secured us a corner table away from the chaos. At 28, he had his father's sharp eyes and his mother's diplomatic smile, a combination that had made him surprisingly effective as Morrison Industries Director of Digital Strategy. "Sarah, I'll cut to the chase," he said, sliding a vanilla latte toward me. "The transition meeting yesterday was a disaster. Your replacement, some guy named Trevor, spent 40 minutes explaining why our Q4 campaign needs to be more synergistic with our brand DNA." Jake made air quotes with obvious disgust. I nearly choked on my coffee. They assigned Trevor Hoffman to Morrison? He's been there 8 months and still thinks CTR stands for click-through rate when he means conversion rate. Exactly my concern. Jake leaned forward. "Look, I know you can't speak poorly of your former employer, but Dad and I have been talking. We're not thrilled about staying with Meridian if you're not there. You landed us a 340% ROI on our last 3 campaigns. Trevor's PowerPoint yesterday suggested we leverage TikTok influencers to maximize our digital footprint in the B2B manufacturing space." I winced. Morrison Industries made industrial ventilation systems. Their average client was a 55-year-old facilities manager, not a 19-year-old dancing to Dua Lipa. "The thing is," Jake continued, "our contract with Meridian has a 30-day termination clause if there's a significant change in account management." Which there obviously has been. My heart started racing. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you start your own consultancy, and Morrison Industries becomes your first client. We're prepared to offer you a 6-month contract worth $85,000, with the possibility of extending if you can maintain the results you were getting us." $85,000. More than my annual salary at Meridian, compressed into 6 months. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was calculating furiously. With my severance, that was enough to not just survive but to actually build something. I'd need to set up an LLC, get insurance, figure out the business side. Dad knows a guy. Business attorney who specializes in consulting firms. He could have you legally operational within a week. Jake pulled out his phone. "I'm texting you his contact info now." As my phone buzzed, Jake's expression grew more serious. "There's something else you should know. Yesterday's meeting wasn't just about campaign strategy. David Kim mentioned that Meridian recently brought on a strategic consultant to help evaluate their client relationships. Apparently, this consultant raised some red flags about your reliability." The coffee shop noise faded to a dull hum. Did this consultant have a name? Mark Stevens. Ring any bell? I managed to keep my voice steady. "We've met." Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. He was sharper than I'd given him credit for. "Well, Mr. Stevens spent considerable time explaining to David why Morrison Industries might benefit from a fresh perspective on our marketing approach. Specifically, he suggested that our recent success metrics might have been inflated." Inflated. My metrics, which I'd triple-checked and documented meticulously. The success that had put Morrison's digital presence on the map and doubled their lead generation. "Jake, I want you to know that every number I reported was." He held up a hand. "Sarah, I've seen our sales figures. I know what happened to our lead quality after you took over. Some consultant with a grudge against you isn't going to convince me that mathematics lies." A grudge. If only he knew. "When do you need an answer?" I asked. "How about by Friday? That gives you 3 days to get your ducks in a row." Jake stood and extended his hand. "For what it's worth, I think whoever pushed you out of Meridian just handed their biggest competitor weapon." As I shook his hand, I realized he was right. Mark thought he'd eliminated a threat. Instead, he'd just created something much more dangerous. A competitor with inside knowledge, a vindictive streak, and absolutely nothing left to lose. That evening, I sat in my living room with my laptop, 3 legal pads, and a bottle of wine that was supposed to last the week. The business attorney Jake had recommended, Michael Chen, had walked me through the LLC paperwork over the phone, his efficiency almost startling. "You can be operational by Thursday if you file everything tomorrow," he'd said. "Basic liability insurance will run about $200 monthly for a consultancy your size. I'd also recommend a separate business banking account and accounting software from day one. Keeps everything clean." Clean. Unlike the mess Mark had made of my life. I was deep into choosing between Phoenix Digital Strategies and Maverick Marketing Solutions when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I was expecting callbacks from insurance companies. Sarah Chen speaking. I'd already started using my maiden name again professionally, another small severing of ties with Mark. "Sarah? This is Amanda Walsh from Pinnacle Tech Solutions." Pinnacle Tech. Another Meridian client, a mid-sized software company that I'd helped grow from $50,000 to $180,000 in monthly ad spend over 2 years. My stomach tightened. "Amanda, hi. How are things?" "Honestly? Confusing as hell. We just got out of our quarterly review with Meridian, and they're suggesting some major changes to our strategy. Changes that directly contradict everything you told us was working." Amanda's voice carried the strain of someone trying to navigate corporate politics. "I probably shouldn't be calling you, but our CEO is freaking out." "What kind of changes?" "They want to cut our LinkedIn advertising by 60% and shift budget to Google display ads. The new guy, Trevor something, says LinkedIn is oversaturated for B2B software sales." Amanda paused. "Sarah, LinkedIn ads are generating 40% of our qualified leads. This feels insane." It was insane. Pinnacle's ideal customer was a VP of operations at a manufacturing company with 200+ employees. LinkedIn was literally where these people spent their professional time. Google display ads would be like hunting deer with a net. "Amanda, I can't give you official advice about your Meridian strategy, but..." I took a breath, making a decision that would either be brilliant or career-ending. "What if I told you there might be another option?" "I'm listening." 20 minutes later, I had my second potential client. Amanda was going to talk to Pinnacle's CEO about their termination clause, apparently similar to Morrison's 30-day provision. If they moved fast, they could be free of Meridian by month's end. But more importantly, Amanda had confirmed my worst suspicions. "Between you and me," she'd said near the end of our call, "this whole thing started when some consultant came in claiming he'd done an objective analysis of Meridian's client results. He specifically flagged several accounts as being artificially inflated by overly aggressive tactics that weren't sustainable long-term. Mark wasn't just targeting me. He was systematically undermining every success I built, painting me as some kind of snake oil salesperson who'd fooled clients with smoke and mirrors. The brilliant, diabolical bastard was salting the earth behind me. After hanging up, I opened a new document and started typing everything I knew about Mark's consulting business. His LinkedIn showed clients in 3 industries: healthcare tech, B2B software, and digital services. All sectors where Meridian had significant business. It wasn't coincidence. Mark was positioning himself as the solution to problems he was creating. Get Sarah fired, destabilize her accounts, then swoop in as the expert who could fix everything she'd allegedly broken. I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop's browser history from my Meridian days. If I was going to fight dirty, I needed ammunition. And I knew exactly where to find it. The next morning, I did something that would have horrified the rule-following employee I'd been just 72 hours ago. I drove to Meridian's parking garage at 6:30 a.m. and waited. Not to confront anyone or cause a scene. I needed intel, and the best source was sitting in a white Honda Civic 3 spots away from my old parking space. Priya emerged at exactly 6:47 a.m. She'd always been the first one in, using the quiet morning hours to organize my calendar and prep for meetings. When she spotted me leaning against my car, her face cycled through surprise, concern, and what looked like relief. Sarah? What are you doing here? I need 5 minutes. Off the record. She glanced toward the elevator, then back at me. Coffee shop across the street. Give me 10 minutes to drop my stuff upstairs. 20 minutes later, we sat in a booth at Murphy's Diner, surrounded by construction workers and early commuters. Priya clutched her coffee like a lifeline. This is so messed up, she said without preamble. Nobody understands what happened. One day you're here, the next day David's sending emails about transition periods and new strategic directions. What's the official story? That you chose to pursue other opportunities. But Sarah, your computer access was revoked before you even had the HR meeting. I checked the system logs. Priya lowered her voice. Someone put in the IT request at 8:15 a.m. Your meeting wasn't until 9:15. They decided to fire me before I even sat down in that conference room. The whole thing had been theater. Priya, I need you to tell me about Mark Stevens. When did he first show up? Her expression darkened. About 6 weeks ago. David introduced him as a process optimization consultant who was going to help streamline our client management systems. But he wasn't just observing, Sarah. He was asking specific questions about account performance, client satisfaction scores, campaign attribution models. What kind of specific questions? Like whether our reporting matched what clients were seeing in their own analytics. Whether we were maybe overselling our impact. Priya stirred her coffee nervously. He spent a whole afternoon going through the Morrison files with Trevor. Then Pinnacle. Then Bradley and Associates. My blood went cold. Bradley and Associates was a law firm I'd been working with for 8 months. They were cautious, analytical, and obsessed with ROI data. If Mark had poisoned that relationship too. Did he meet with any of the clients directly? Not that I know of, but... Priya hesitated. Rebecca scheduled a bunch of client satisfaction check-ins right after Mark finished his review. I thought it was weird timing. Client satisfaction check-ins. Meridian rarely did those unless there was a problem. Mark had probably planted enough doubt that they felt compelled to do damage control, which would only make the clients more suspicious. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. There's something else, Priya continued. Yesterday, Mark had a closed-door meeting with David and Rebecca. Afterward, Rebecca started making calls to other agencies in town. I think they're worried about client retention. Other agencies. They were preparing for defections, which meant Mark's strategy was backfiring. He destabilized my accounts, but instead of keeping them at Meridian, he'd made them question the entire relationship. Priya, if hypothetically someone wanted to know when certain client contracts were up for renewal, where would they find that information? She stared at me for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. Hypothetically, I might have updated the client renewal spreadsheet yesterday and noticed some interesting dates. She slid the phone across the table. Morrison Industries, 30-day termination clause. Pinnacle Tech, month-to-month after initial term, expires November 30th. Bradley and Associates, 60-day notice required, contract ends December 15th. Hypothetically, I said, taking a photo of her screen, someone might find this information very useful for planning purposes. As we walked back toward the parking garage, Priya grabbed my arm. Sarah, whatever you're planning, be careful. Mark's not done. He was asking Rebecca about your non-compete agreement yesterday. Non-compete. My contract had a standard clause preventing me from soliciting Meridian clients for 12 months. But there was a crucial difference between soliciting and responding when clients came to you. Mark had made one critical error in his revenge plot. He'd assumed I'd play defense. He was about to learn that the best defense is a devastating offense. That afternoon, I sat in Michael Chen's downtown office, officially signing the papers that made Phoenix Digital Strategies a legal entity. The LLC certificate felt surreal in my hands. 48 hours ago, I was an employee, now I was a business owner. One more thing, Michael said, sliding another document across his desk. Given what you told me about your former employer's consultant, I'd recommend having this non-compete analysis on file. Your Meridian agreement has some interesting loopholes. I scanned the legal brief he'd prepared. The key phrase jumped out: employee shall not directly solicit or actively pursue existing clients of Meridian Digital for a period of 12 months. Directly solicit, I repeated. Exactly. If clients approach you independently, or if they terminate their Meridian contracts before engaging your services, the non-compete doesn't apply. Your former employer would have to prove you initiated contact with intent to steal business. Michael leaned back in his chair. From what you described, it sounds like clients are reaching out to you because they're dissatisfied with current service. Legal protection felt good, but I needed more than defensive strategies. I needed intelligence. That evening, I did something that would have mortified my rule-following former self. I created a fake LinkedIn profile. Jennifer Walsh, digital marketing analyst, had a generic stock photo, sparse but believable work history, and most importantly, no connection to Sarah Chin. Within hours, I'd sent connection requests to key players in Mark's network. The responses came faster than expected. Mark had been busy expanding his professional circle, adding contacts from companies across 3 states. But one connection made my blood run cold: Janet Morrison, Jake's aunt and Morrison Industries CFO. If Mark was targeting the Morrison family directly, my coffee shop conversation with Jake might have been too little, too late. I grabbed my phone and called Jake's direct line. Sarah? Perfect timing. I was just about to call you. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has anyone from outside your company contacted you or your family about Meridian's performance on your account? The pause lasted too long. How did you know? My stomach dropped. Tell me. Yesterday, some consultant named Mark Stevens called Aunt Janet. Said he was doing an independent audit of Meridian's client results and wanted to verify our satisfaction scores. Asked a lot of detailed questions about campaign performance, whether we felt we were getting accurate reporting. Jake's voice tightened. Janet thought it was weird that he knew so much about our internal metrics. What did she tell him? The truth, that we'd been thrilled with results since you took over our account. But Sarah, he kept pushing, asking if we verified the numbers independently, whether we thought some of the attribution models might be aggressive. There was that word again. Mark was painting me as someone who manipulated data to look better than reality. The perfect setup for when my former client's results inevitably declined under Trevor's management. Jake, I need you to know something. Mark Stevens is my ex-husband. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Your ex-husband is trying to sabotage your former clients? He's trying to sabotage me. The clients are collateral damage. I closed my eyes. Look, I understand if this changes things. The last thing I want is to drag Morrison Industries into my personal drama. Are you kidding? This makes me want to work with you even more. Jake's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Nobody manipulates my family's business for some petty revenge scheme. We're pulling out of Meridian first thing Monday morning, and I'm calling 3 other CEOs who've been asking about our digital marketing success. 3 other CEOs. The referral network I'd spent 3 years building was about to become Mark's worst nightmare. One more thing, Jake continued. Janet recorded that phone call. She records everything for compliance reasons. Might be useful if things get ugly. As I hung up, I realized Mark had just made his second critical mistake. He'd underestimated how much my clients valued our working relationship. His third mistake would be the one that destroyed him. By Friday morning, Phoenix Digital Strategies had its first official contract. Jake Morrison had been true to his word. The 6-month agreement sat on my kitchen table next to incorporation papers and a business credit card application. But as I prepared to sign what should have been a celebration, my phone rang with news that changed everything. Sarah, it's Amanda from Pinnacle Tech. We have a problem. I gripped the phone tighter. What happened? Mark Stevens called our CEO directly yesterday. Told him he discovered significant discrepancies in our campaign reporting and that we might want to audit our marketing spend before making any rash decisions about changing agencies. Amanda's voice was strained. He specifically mentioned you by name, Sarah. Said you had a history of inflating metrics to protect your commission structure. My commission structure. At Meridian, I was salary plus a small quarterly bonus based on client retention. There was no financial incentive to inflate anything. If anything, sustainable results protected my job better than fake numbers ever could. Did your CEO buy it? He spooked. Stevens apparently had detailed knowledge of our campaign structure, our monthly spend, even our internal conversion tracking setup. How would he know that unless there was truth to what he was saying? Amanda paused. Sarah, I believe you, but I can't convince my boss to terminate a contract based on faith when someone with inside knowledge is raising red flags. After hanging up, I sat staring at the Morrison contract I could no longer bring myself to sign. If Mark could kill the Pinnacle opportunity with one phone call, he could do the same to Morrison, Bradley and Associates, or anyone else who tried to work with me. I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. That's when Jennifer Walsh, my fake LinkedIn profile, received an interesting message from Marcus Chen, VP of Strategy at Synergy Solutions, one of Mark's consulting clients. Hi Jennifer, saw you work in digital marketing analytics. Would love your perspective on some campaign data we're reviewing. Our consultant is recommending major budget shifts, but the numbers seem off. Coffee sometime next week? Synergy Solutions. I recognized them from Mark's LinkedIn, a $50 million software company he'd been consulting for 3 months. More importantly, they were Meridian's biggest competitor in the B2B space. Jennifer agreed to coffee. Monday afternoon, I sat across from Marcus at a trendy cafe downtown, wearing glasses I didn't need and a blonde wig I'd ordered from Amazon. The disguise felt ridiculous, but Marcus was too focused on his laptop screen to pay attention to my appearance. Look at this data, he said, turning his screen toward me. Our consultant says these LinkedIn campaign results are artificially inflated and we should shift 70% of our budget to Google Ads. But when I run the numbers myself, LinkedIn is generating twice the qualified leads at half the cost per acquisition. I studied Mark's analysis, recognizing his methodology immediately. He was using attribution windows that undermined LinkedIn's performance while giving Google credit for conversions that had multiple touchpoints. Classic data manipulation disguised as conservative analysis. Your consultant is using a 7-day attribution window for LinkedIn but 30 days for Google, I explained, pointing to the small print. That's like comparing apple sales in one grocery store to orange sales across an entire city. Marcus leaned back, his expression darkening. So he's either incompetent or deliberately misleading us. Based on this analysis? One of those is definitely true. I closed his laptop gently. Marcus, can I ask who recommended this consultant? David Kim at Meridian Digital. Said Mark Stevens was an expert at optimizing marketing spend. Marcus rubbed his forehead. We're paying him $12,000 a month to torpedo our best performing campaigns. $12,000 a month. Mark was making $144,000 annually just from Synergy, and according to his LinkedIn, he had at least 6 other active consulting clients. My ex-husband had built a very profitable business around sabotaging digital marketing strategies. Hypothetically, I said carefully, what would happen if you discovered your consultant had undisclosed conflicts of interest? We'd terminate immediately and probably pursue recovery of fees paid. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Why? Do you know something about Stevens? Jennifer Walsh excused herself to use the restroom, and Sarah Chin made a decision that would either vindicate her or destroy what remained of her professional reputation. Marcus, there's something you need to know about your consultant's relationship with the person who recommended him. When I returned to the table, I'd made my choice. Marcus deserved the truth, and I needed an ally who understood Mark's methodology from the inside. Marcus, I need to tell you something, but first I need your word that this conversation stays between us until you decide how to handle it. He nodded, his expression serious. You have it. My name isn't Jennifer Walsh. I'm Sarah Chan, and Mark Stevens is my ex-husband. I pulled off the ridiculous glasses, watching his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally anger. 3 weeks ago, he used his relationship with David Kim to get me fired from Meridian based on fabricated performance issues. Now he's systematically destroying my professional reputation while building his consulting business on the same lies. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. The Sarah Chan who ran the Morrison Industries campaign that everyone in our industry talked about last year. That's me. And the methodology Mark's using to discredit your LinkedIn campaigns? It's the same one he used to convince Meridian that my client results were inflated. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots from my fake LinkedIn profile. He's not just incompetent, Marcus. He's deliberately sabotaging effective marketing strategies to justify his consulting fees. Jesus Christ. Marcus opened his laptop again, scrolling through Mark's recommendations with new eyes. If LinkedIn is actually our best channel and we cut it by 70%, our lead generation will crater. Then he'll probably recommend some expensive recovery strategy that coincidentally requires extending his contract. Exactly. And when your results inevitably decline, he'll blame it on market conditions or your previous marketing team's unsustainable tactics. I leaned forward. Marcus, how many other companies has David Kim referred to Mark? He pulled up his notes app. At least 4 that I know of personally. Techflow Industries, Bradley and Associates, Cornerstone Manufacturing, and some healthcare software company in Portland. Bradley and Associates. My former client. Mark wasn't just targeting me, he was systematically working through Meridian's entire client base, positioning himself as a solution to problems he was creating. What if I told you I could prove that Mark's analysis is deliberately misleading, and that I have documentation showing his real motivation isn't optimizing your marketing spend? Marcus's eyes lit up with something between hope and vindictive satisfaction. I'd say Synergy Solutions might be interested in a new marketing consultant, and our legal department might be very interested in that documentation. Over the next hour, I walked Marcus through everything: Mark's sudden appearance at Meridian, his targeted analysis of my accounts, the coordinated client calls, and most damning of all, the recording Jake's aunt had made of Mark questioning Morrison Industries' satisfaction with their results. He's running a long con, Marcus said, shaking his head. Destabilize existing relationships, position himself as the expert who can fix the problems, then implement strategies that require ongoing consultation to manage. The beautiful part is that when results decline under his recommendations, he can blame the previous consultant, me, for creating unsustainable expectations. I felt the familiar anger rising. He's not just destroying my career, Marcus. He's actively harming businesses to feed his own ego and bank account. Marcus closed his laptop with decisive finality. Sarah, I'm terminating Mark's contract tomorrow morning. But more than that, I want to hire Phoenix Digital Strategies to audit everything he's recommended and build a real strategy based on actual data. Are you sure? Working with me puts you directly in the middle of my war with Mark. Good. I don't like being manipulated, and I especially don't like paying someone $12,000 a month for the privilege. Marcus extended his hand. Besides, if you're half as good as your reputation suggests, this is the best business decision I'll make this year. As we shook hands, I realized Mark had just made his biggest mistake yet. He'd assumed that destroying my credibility would be enough to protect his scheme. Instead, he'd given me a perfect inside view of his entire operation, and now I had a client with both the resources and motivation to help me expose everything. The hunter was about to become the hunted. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Marcus's contract spread across my coffee table, a 6-month deal worth $75,000 that would officially launch Phoenix Digital Strategies into profitability. But as I reached for my pen, my phone buzzed with a call from Jake Morrison. Sarah, we have a situation. Mark Stevens just showed up at our headquarters. My blood turned to ice. He's there now? Dad's in a meeting with him as we speak. Stevens claimed there was an urgent compliance issue with our digital marketing contracts that required immediate attention. Jake's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. He somehow knew about our conversation, Sarah. He specifically mentioned that we'd been approached by terminated Meridian employees making false promises about maintaining performance standards. The pen slipped from my fingers. Mark knew I'd been talking to clients. Which meant either someone at Meridian was feeding him information, or he'd been monitoring communications somehow. Jake, get your dad out of that meeting. Now. Why? What aren't you telling me? I closed my eyes, making a calculation that could either save or destroy everything. Because I just spent 3 hours with one of Mark's other consulting clients, and he's not who he says he is. He's running a systematic fraud operation, and your family's company is his next target. 23 minutes later, I was sitting in the Morrison Industries conference room with Jake, his father Robert Morrison, and CFO Janet Morrison. Mark had left abruptly when Robert claimed a family emergency, but not before leaving behind a folder of documents that made my stomach churn. He presented this as an independent audit of Meridian's reporting accuracy, Robert said, sliding the folder toward me. Claims your campaign metrics were inflated by 40 to 60% and that we're at risk of significant budget waste if we don't immediately restructure our digital strategy. I opened the folder to find page after page of analysis that would have been impressive if it wasn't completely fabricated. Mark had created parallel campaigns using our exact parameters but with artificially restricted audiences and pessimistic conversion tracking. The fake data showed dismal performance that made my actual results look impossibly optimistic. This is sophisticated, I admitted, studying his methodology. If I didn't know our real conversion data intimately, I might believe this analysis myself. Janet leaned forward. So you're saying this is falsified? I'm saying Mark created shadow campaigns designed to fail, then presented them as proof that our successful campaigns were somehow fraudulent. I pulled out my phone and showed them Marcus's text from an hour earlier. Stevens just called asking about our LinkedIn performance. Wanted to know if we'd been influenced by any former Meridian employees. Told him to lose my number. The room went quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. He's working multiple angles simultaneously, Jake said slowly. Discrediting you with existing clients while positioning himself as the solution to problems he's creating. Robert's expression had hardened into something I'd never seen before, the look of a businessman who just realized someone was trying to steal from his family. Sarah, what do you need from us? Honestly? I need you to trust me long enough to prove that everything Mark told you is a lie. I pulled the Morrison contract from my bag. But more than that, I need you to understand that hiring me puts Morrison Industries at the center of a war. Mark won't stop with fake audits and scare tactics. Janet exchanged a look with her brother. What kind of escalation are we talking about? Before I could answer, Jake's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. It's Trevor Hoffman from Meridian. He says there's an emergency with our account and they need an immediate meeting to discuss potential legal issues with our campaign data. Mark wasn't just escalating. He was going nuclear. And he'd just made the mistake that would finally give me everything I needed to destroy him. Jake declined Trevor's call, but it rang again immediately. Then Janet's phone started buzzing. Then Robert's. They're calling all of us, Janet said, staring at her screen. David, Kim, Trevor, even Rebecca from HR. What the hell is happening? I knew exactly what was happening. Mark was activating every connection he had at Meridian to create a crisis that would force Morrison Industries back into line. Classic scorched earth tactics. If he couldn't have a client, he'd make sure I couldn't either. Don't answer, I said quickly. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. But Robert's desk phone was already ringing, the call transferring up from reception. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Morrison, I have David Kim from Meridian Digital on line 1. He says it's urgent regarding potential contract violations and legal exposure. Legal exposure. Mark had found a way to weaponize my non-compete agreement. Robert looked at me questioningly. I nodded. We needed to hear this. David, you're on speaker with my family and our marketing consultant, Robert said after picking up. What's this about legal exposure? David's voice carried a stress I'd never heard during my 3 years working for him. Robert, we discovered that Sarah Chen has been soliciting Morrison Industries while still bound by her non-compete agreement. Our legal team is prepared to file an injunction to prevent any unauthorized transfer of proprietary campaign data or strategic intelligence. Proprietary campaign data. They were claiming that my knowledge of Morrison's successful strategies somehow belonged to Meridian, even though I developed them. Furthermore, David continued, our compliance audit has revealed significant discrepancies in the performance metrics reported for your account. We need an immediate meeting to discuss potential remediation and ensure you have accurate data for your business planning. Jake started to respond, but I held up a hand and mouthed recorder while pointing to Janet's phone. She quickly activated the voice memo app. David, what kind of discrepancies are we talking about? Robert asked, his voice carefully neutral. Our external consultant has identified attribution errors that may have inflated your ROI calculations by as much as 50%. We're concerned that any decisions made based on Sarah's reporting could expose Morrison Industries to significant budget waste or compliance issues with your board. External consultant. Mark wasn't even hiding his involvement anymore. I see, Robert said slowly. And this external consultant, would that be Mark Stevens? The pause lasted too long. Mark is a respected industry expert who's helped us identify systematic issues with several former employees' work product. His findings are quite concerning. Janet was furiously taking notes while her phone continued recording. Jake looked like he wanted to reach through the speaker and strangle David. David, I need to ask you a direct question, Robert continued. Is Mark Stevens being compensated by Meridian for this audit work? Another pause. Mark's compensation structure isn't relevant to the compliance issues we're discussing. Actually, it's extremely relevant, I interrupted, unable to stay quiet any longer. Hi David, it's Sarah. I need you to know that your respected industry expert is my ex-husband, and he's currently bilking other companies with the same fake audit scheme he's running on you. The line went dead silent except for what sounded like papers shuffling. Sarah, you're in violation of your non-compete by even being in this meeting, David finally said, his voice tight. We'll be filing for an injunction first thing tomorrow morning. File away, Robert said before I could respond. But you should know that Morrison Industries has retained legal counsel regarding fraudulent misrepresentation of campaign performance. If your external consultant has been providing false data to support breach of contract claims, we'll be pursuing damages. Robert, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, David. We're terminating our contract with Meridian effective immediately. You'll receive formal notice within the hour. Robert's voice carried the authority of someone who'd built a $50 million company from nothing. And David? The next time someone tries to manipulate my family's business for personal revenge, they better make sure we can't prove it. The call ended with a decisive click, leaving us in silence punctuated only by the sound of our own breathing. Well, Janet said finally, that was illuminating. Did everyone else catch David's admission that Mark's compensation isn't supposed to be relevant? Because that implies there definitely is compensation to hide. Jake was already on his laptop. I'm documenting everything while it's fresh. Timeline, quotes, the fact that they coordinated multiple simultaneous calls to pressure us. He looked up at me. Sarah, what's our next move? Our next move. They were all in now, fully committed to fighting Mark's scheme. We prove that David and Mark are running a conspiracy to defraud clients, I said, pulling out the Synergy Solutions contract I'd signed an hour earlier. And we use every connection we have to expose them before they destroy anyone else's business. Janet smiled grimly. Good. Because I just remembered something useful. My college roommate is now a partner at the law firm that handles Meridian's corporate contracts. I think she'd be very interested in knowing about potential conflicts of interest in their consulting relationships. As the Morrison family began making calls to lawyers, accountants, and business contacts across 3 states, I realized Mark had finally pushed too far. His revenge plot had just united 3 successful companies against him, each with resources and connections he couldn't match. The war was about to become very public and very expensive. For him. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a voice mailbox full of what sounded like legal threats. But the text message from Marcus at Synergy Solutions made my coffee go cold. Emergency. Mark somehow got our board to call an audit meeting. They're questioning our entire digital strategy. Can you be here by 10 a.m.? I threw on the first professional outfit I could find and drove across town with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. If Mark could mobilize Synergy's board of directors, he had connections I'd never suspected. Marcus met me in the lobby looking like he hadn't slept. Sarah, this is bad. Mark called our chairman directly at 6 a.m., claimed he'd discovered fiduciary irregularities in our marketing spend. Said we were about to make a catastrophic decision based on fraudulent data. What kind of fiduciary irregularities? That's the brilliant part, he's not claiming the campaign data is fake. He's saying that working with you violates our corporate governance policies because you're involved in active litigation that could expose us to liability. Marcus jabbed the elevator button. Our legal department is freaking out about potential lawsuits, our CMO thinks you're some kind of con artist, and the board wants a full presentation on why we terminated a consultant who was supposedly protecting us from fraud. The elevator doors opened to reveal Janet Morrison, who looked equally frazzled. Janet? What are you doing here? Damage control, she said grimly. Mark called 3 of our biggest suppliers this morning, told them Morrison Industries was under investigation for marketing fraud and they might want to reconsider our credit terms. 2 of them have already frozen our accounts pending clarification of our legal status. The elevator rose in tense silence. Mark wasn't just attacking my professional relationships anymore, he was going after the entire business ecosystem around me. Every client, every vendor, every professional connection was becoming a weapon in his campaign. There's more, Marcus said as we reached the 15th floor. David Kim sent a formal cease and desist letter to our legal department this morning. Claims that any proprietary Meridian strategies or methodologies shared with Synergy constitute theft of intellectual property. They're demanding copies of all communications between us and threatening to sue both companies. My stomach dropped. Marcus, I need you to understand something. I never shared any proprietary Meridian information with you. Everything I showed you was standard industry analysis available to anyone with basic marketing knowledge. I know that, and you know that. But our board doesn't know that, and they're not willing to risk $1 million lawsuit to find out. Marcus stopped outside a conference room where I could see suits and serious expressions through the glass. Sarah, they're voting in 15 minutes on whether to terminate your contract and publicly distance the company from Phoenix Digital Strategies. Through the window, I recognized Synergy's CEO, 2 board members, and their head of legal, all people whose first impression of me would be shaped by Mark's lies. If they voted to terminate, other potential clients would hear about it. The reputation damage could kill Phoenix Digital before it really started. What do you need from me? I asked. A miracle, Janet said. Because in about 10 minutes, you need to convince a room full of executives that your ex-husband is running an elaborate fraud scheme, that David Kim is either complicit or incompetent, and that keeping you as a consultant is worth the legal risk. I stared through the conference room glass at the people who held my professional future in their hands. Mark had orchestrated this perfectly, created enough chaos and legal threats that the safest business decision was to abandon me entirely. But he'd forgotten something crucial about desperate people. We stopped playing by the rules. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I think I have exactly what we need. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I'd been saving for exactly this moment. Marcus, does Synergy's conference room have a speakerphone? Yes, but Sarah, we're running out of time. Trust me. I hit dial and waited through 3 rings before a familiar voice answered. Michael Chan, attorney at law. Michael, it's Sarah. I need you to conference in Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. Tell him it's about the Mark Stevens case we discussed yesterday. Marcus and Janet stared at me. Through the glass, I could see the board members checking their watches. Sarah, Michael's voice was carefully neutral. Are you sure you want to escalate this to criminal investigation level? Mark just froze Morrison Industries supplier accounts and convinced Synergy's board that I'm under federal investigation. He escalated this himself. I put the phone on speaker as we entered the conference room. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my attorney, Michael Chen, and Detective James Rodriguez from the Portland Financial Crimes Division. The room went completely silent except for the sound of expensive suits shifting uncomfortably. Good morning, Detective Rodriguez's voice carried the authority that only comes with a badge. Mr. Chen contacted our office yesterday regarding potential wire fraud and conspiracy charges related to fraudulent business consulting practices. We've been monitoring communications between Mark Stevens and David Kim at Meridian Digital. Synergy CEO, William Harris, looked like he'd swallowed his tie. Detective, are you saying Synergy Solutions is under investigation? Sir, Synergy appears to be a victim, not a perpetrator. Our investigation indicates that Mr. Stevens has been systematically defrauding multiple businesses by providing false performance audits while receiving undisclosed compensation from Meridian Digital. Papers rustled on the detective's end. We have recordings of Mr. Stevens making materially false statements about campaign performance data, and bank records showing payments from Meridian that weren't disclosed to his consulting clients. Bank records. Michael had been busy in the past 24 hours. Furthermore, the detective continued, Mr. Stevens' contact with your board this morning included false claims about ongoing federal investigations. There is no investigation of Ms. Chen or any of Mr. Stevens' victims. However, there is now an active investigation into Mr. Stevens and Mr. Kim for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Janet leaned forward. Detective, what about the threats to our supplier relationships? Ma'am, we documented 6 separate instances of Mr. Stevens making false statements to business partners of Morrison Industries and Synergy Solutions. Each instance represents potential charges of interstate wire fraud with penalties up to 20 years in federal prison. The board's legal counsel was frantically taking notes. Detective Rodriguez, what's the timeline for your investigation? We're executing search warrants for Meridian Digital's offices this afternoon. We expect to have enough evidence for indictments within 72 hours. The detective's voice carried grim satisfaction. Gentlemen, I'd strongly recommend that any cease and desist letters you received from Meridian Digital be forwarded to our office. Threats made in furtherance of an ongoing fraud scheme constitute additional federal charges. William Harris cleared his throat. Detective, if Synergy cooperates fully with your investigation, what kind of legal exposure are we looking at? None, sir. You're victims of a sophisticated fraud scheme. Your cooperation would be appreciated, but you're not targets of our investigation. After the call ended, the conference room stayed silent for nearly a minute. Finally, William spoke. Ms. Chen, it appears we owe you an apology. And probably a bonus for exposing this fraud before it cost us more money. He turned to his legal counsel. Draft a public statement supporting Ms. Chen and Phoenix Digital Strategies. I want it released within the hour. Marcus was grinning like he'd won the lottery. Sarah, how long have you been working with the police? Since yesterday afternoon. Michael has connections in financial crimes, and Mark's scheme was sophisticated enough to trigger federal jurisdiction. I felt the tension finally leaving my shoulders. But honestly, I was bluffing about the search warrants. I hoped Detective Rodriguez would play along. You hoped? Janet looked stunned. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, search warrants approved. FBI executing at Meridian in 2 hours. Rodriguez says you missed her calling as a detective. I showed them the message. Okay, I wasn't completely bluffing. Outside the conference room windows, Portland stretched out under gray October skies. Somewhere across town, Mark was probably making more threatening phone calls, unaware that his entire scheme was about to collapse. His fourth mistake had been threatening federal agencies that didn't exist. His final mistake was about to walk through Meridian's front door wearing FBI windbreakers. At 2:17 p.m., I sat in my car across from Meridian Digital's office building, watching federal agents carry boxes of evidence through the glass lobby doors. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past hour, reporters, former colleagues, even clients I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to know about the FBI raid that was already trending on local business Twitter. But the call that mattered came at 2:34 p.m. Sarah, it's Jake. You need to see the news. I pulled up the Portland Business Journal's breaking news alert. FBI raids Meridian Digital offices in marketing fraud investigation, ex-employees consulting scheme exposed. Below that, a smaller headline made my blood race. Stevens Consulting Group files for emergency bankruptcy protection. Mark's entire operation had collapsed in less than 6 hours. There's more, Jake continued. Channel 8 just ran an interview with 3 other business owners who say Stevens cost them a combined $400,000 in failed marketing campaigns. Apparently, they all got calls from Detective Rodriguez this morning asking them to come forward. I refreshed my browser and found the video. 3 CEOs I didn't recognize, all telling variations of the same story. Mark had convinced them their existing marketing was fraudulent, charged them premium rates for corrective strategies that destroyed their lead generation, then disappeared when the campaigns failed. The most disturbing part, one CEO told the reporter, is that Stevens seemed to have inside information about our previous marketing performance. He knew details about our campaigns that should have been confidential to our former agency. Former agency. I had a sinking feeling I knew which agency that was. My phone rang again, this time showing David Kim's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sarah. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. We need to talk. I'm listening. The FBI seized everything. Computers, files, bank records, even my personal phone. David's words came in short bursts, like he was having trouble breathing. They showed me recordings of Mark's calls to clients. Sarah, I swear I didn't know he was lying about the performance data. But you knew he was your ex-husband when you hired him. The pause stretched long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Rebecca told me. She thought it was relevant to mention during his background check. I thought. God, I thought it was just coincidence that he specialized in auditing the accounts you'd managed. Coincidence. David had helped orchestrate my firing knowing that my ex-husband was the one providing the evidence against me. David, how much did Meridian pay Mark for his consulting work? $68,000 over 3 months. But Sarah, the contracts were legitimate. He really was analyzing campaign performance. Using falsified data designed to discredit me specifically. I watched another FBI agent emerge from the building carrying a computer tower. David, you didn't just fire me. You helped Mark destroy my reputation while he built other companies for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know. Jesus Christ, I know. His voice cracked. The FBI agent, Rodriguez, he played me recordings of Mark laughing about how easy it was to manipulate our decision-making process. He called me a useful idiot who was too proud to admit he'd been fooled by a woman. A woman. Mark's misogyny had been part of his sales pitch to David. There's something else, David continued. Mark wasn't just targeting your accounts. He had a spreadsheet, Sarah. Every client you'd ever worked with successfully, their contract renewal dates, their decision-makers' contact information. He was planning to sabotage or steal every professional relationship you'd ever built. The scope of Mark's revenge was finally coming into focus. It wasn't enough to get me fired, he'd wanted to ensure I could never rebuild my career anywhere in the industry. How long until Meridian shuts down? I asked. We might survive if we can prove this was all Mark's manipulation, but 3 major clients have already terminated their contracts. The Morrison cancellation started an avalanche. David's laugh sounded bitter. Mark destroyed your career and ended up taking down my company in the process. As we hung up, I realized Mark had made one final, catastrophic miscalculation. His revenge scheme had been so comprehensive, so vindictive, that it revealed his true character to everyone who witnessed it. Including a federal judge who would soon be setting his bail at $500,000. 6 weeks after the FBI raid, I thought the worst was behind me. Phoenix Digital Strategies had landed 4 new clients, Detective Rodriguez had called to say Mark's trial date was set for March, and I'd finally stopped checking over my shoulder every time I walked to my car. Then I got the call that changed everything. Ms. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Portland Police Bureau. We need you to come to the station immediately regarding Mark Stevens. My blood went cold. What happened? Did he make bail? Ma'am, Mr. Stevens was found dead in his holding cell this morning at 6:23 a.m. We're treating it as a suicide, but there are some irregularities we need to discuss. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto my kitchen counter. Mark was dead. My ex-husband, the man who'd systematically destroyed my life and nearly succeeded, was gone. But Detective Walsh's next words made my world tilt sideways. Ms. Chen? We found a letter addressed to you in his cell. And there's something else, bank records showing a $250,000 transfer to an overseas account just 3 days before his arrest. We think he may have had a partner we haven't identified yet. A partner. The room spun as implications crashed over me. If Mark had been working with someone else, someone still free, then his death might not end my nightmare. It might just be the beginning of a new one. I'll be right there, I managed to say. The drive to the police station felt surreal, like navigating through fog. Mark was dead, but somehow I felt more afraid than I had when he was actively sabotaging my life. Dead enemies can't hurt you, but their secrets can destroy everything you've rebuilt. Detective Walsh, no relation to my fake LinkedIn persona, she assured me with dark humor, was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Before I show you the letter, I need to ask about your ex-husband's financial situation during your marriage. Did he have access to significant liquid assets? Investment accounts, cryptocurrency, anything that might explain a $250,000 transfer? I shook my head. Mark was always secretive about money, but we lived paycheck to paycheck. He claimed his consulting business was just getting started, maybe pulling in $30,000 annually. The number felt pathetic now, knowing what I'd learned about his recent earnings. Well, someone paid him $250,000 on October 15th, the same day our investigation became public. The transfer originated from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Detective Walsh slid a bank statement across her desk. 3 days later, he was arrested. Yesterday, he transferred the full amount to another offshore account we can't trace. October 15th. The day after I'd sat in Synergy's conference room watching federal agents raid Meridian's offices. Someone had paid Mark a fortune right when his scheme collapsed. Detective, what if this wasn't payment for past work? What if someone hired him to destroy my career specifically, and the consulting fraud was just cover? Her expression sharpened. Explain. Mark's revenge against me was incredibly sophisticated, too sophisticated for someone who'd been running small-time marketing scams. The fake data analysis, the coordinated client calls, the legal threats. What if someone with serious resources wanted me neutralized professionally and hired Mark to do it? Detective Walsh opened a file folder. That brings us to the letter. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Mark's familiar handwriting. He left specific instructions that this should only be given to you if something happened to him. With shaking fingers, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made my blood freeze. Sarah, if you're reading this, they found out I was planning to confess everything. The consulting fraud was real, but it wasn't my idea. Someone much more dangerous than me wanted you destroyed, and I was just the weapon they chose. The $250,000 was supposed to buy my silence permanently, but I couldn't live with what we did to those other businesses. Check Marcus Chan's Real client list at Synergy, not the one they show investors. The person who hired me sits on their board. Trust no one, especially not the people who've been helping you. M. My hands trembled as I read it twice more. Marcus Chan, my attorney Michael's last name was Chin too. And Marcus at Synergy had been almost too eager to help me expose Mark's scheme. Detective, I whispered, I think I've been played by everyone. Detective Walsh watched my face carefully as I processed the letter. Ms. Chen, we need to discuss Marcus at Synergy Solutions. Our financial investigation revealed some interesting connections. She pulled out another folder, this one thick with documents. Marcus Chen and your attorney Michael Chen are brothers. Michael's law firm received a $75,000 payment from the same Cayman Islands shell company that paid your ex-husband. And Marcus personally recommended you for 3 of your current consulting contracts, all companies that coincidentally needed to replace marketing strategies that Mark had sabotaged. The room felt like it was closing in. You're saying they orchestrated everything? Including helping me fight back? We think they used Mark to destroy your career, then positioned themselves as your saviors so you'd rebuild it exactly where they wanted. Detective Walsh spread out a timeline. Look at the sequence. Mark gets you fired and sabotages your reputation. Marcus coincidentally becomes dissatisfied with Mark's consulting. Michael provides legal protection. Marcus gives you your first major client contract. Michael handles your business formation. My mind raced through every interaction. Marcus's too perfect timing when he needed marketing help. Michael's immediate availability for legal services. The way they both pushed me toward specific clients, specific strategies. They were steering me, I said slowly. Building Phoenix Digital exactly the way they wanted it. We believe the end goal was acquisition. Create a successful marketing firm with valuable client relationships, then force a sale at below market rates. She showed me more documents. The Chin brothers have done this twice before in Seattle. They're currently under investigation for a similar scheme involving a web development company. I stared at the evidence, feeling stupid and used. But detective, I exposed Mark's fraud. I brought you recordings and documentation that led to his arrest. Which gave their scheme credibility. Nothing sells a con like letting the Mark think they're winning. Detective Walsh leaned forward. Ms. Chen, we think Mark's death wasn't suicide. The letter suggests he was ready to expose the whole operation. Someone with access to the jail made sure he couldn't talk. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If the Chin brothers were willing to have Mark killed to protect their operation, I was in serious danger. And they knew everything about my business, my clients, my plans. What happens now? I asked. Now we arrest them both and seize all assets related to Phoenix Digital Strategies as evidence. Detective Walsh's expression was apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, Ms. Chen, but your company was built on the proceeds of criminal conspiracy. We have to freeze everything while we sort out what's legitimate. 6 months later, I sat in a different coffee shop in a different city, having relocated to Denver after the Chin brothers' trial. The jury had convicted them on racketeering, conspiracy, and Mark's murder. Apparently Michael had paid a corrections officer $50,000 to make it look like suicide. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison. Phoenix Digital 2.0 launch party next month? Dad wants to invest properly this time. The Morrison family had stuck with me through the investigation, along with 2 other clients who realized they were victims too. We'd rebuilt everything from scratch, legitimately this time, and Phoenix Digital Strategies was finally the company I'd originally envisioned. But the best part was the email I'd received that morning from the FBI's Asset Forfeiture Division. Ms. Chen, we've recovered $1.2 million in assets from the Chen conspiracy. As the primary victim, you're entitled to 60% of recovered funds. Check attached. Mark's plan to destroy me had backfired spectacularly. His death had exposed a criminal network worth millions. And his final act of conscience had made me wealthy enough to build the marketing empire I'd always dreamed of. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well.